Welcome to Parenting Adventures. We help parents empower their kids to build a growth mindset so they can tackle any size challenge that school and life can throw at them. From grades to bullying and struggles at home and school, and everything in between. Whether you're in the elementary alphabet stage or navigating high school credits, we're diving into how you can relate and influence positive action. Stick around for real solutions, expert tips, and stories that resonate and inspire. Ready for personalized mindful tutoring? Head to tutorteach.ca/tutoring to see how our 9 cornerstones to success have helped over 3,000 students achieve their goals. Now, let's dig into the episode.
Next week is Anti-Bullying Week, and today we're excited to have the very special guest, Lisa Dixon-Wells. As the founder of Dare to Care, the leading anti-bullying organization in Canada, Lisa has dedicated her career to bullying prevention and mental health in schools and sport organizations across the country. With over 30 years of experience working in school systems and amateur sport, Lisa has developed early intervention programs that have become a cornerstone in the fight against bullying. She was also awarded the Government of Alberta Inspiration Award for Leadership in Bully Prevention. In today's episode, we revisit the difference between bullying and conflict, discuss the long-term impacts of bullying on both the victim and the bully, and explore how early intervention can break the cycle of harmful behavior. Lisa also shares the most effective ways that parents and educators can address bullying behavior. Stay tuned for this thought-provoking conversation and learn how we can all play a role in creating safer spaces for our children. Hi, Lisa. It's so great to have you back as our first returning guest. Many listeners may not know, but you were actually our first guest on the Parenting Adventures podcast. So thank you so much for coming back on to chat with us again.
Well, thank you for having me. I certainly love to chat about what Dare to Care does, and hopefully this is helpful to all your listeners.
It absolutely is. So I think it's important to understand exactly what bullying is. I know we talked last time about the difference between bullying and conflict. Would you mind refreshing the audience and for our new listeners, what is the difference and how can it be identified?
Yeah, and you know what, Dare to Care, whether we're talking to kids or parents or coaches or teachers, we always talk about 3 different behaviors: mean moments, conflict, and bullying. And the mean moments is something we all have. It's usually based out of frustration or emotion. We're tired, we're hungry, didn't have a good sleep, and we lash out at people close to us and strangers. It's a one-time thing. It's hurtful, but hopefully we apologize and we move on. But mean moments are very normal. Conflict is also very, very normal. It's usually due to some sort of misunderstanding or miscommunication or simply a difference of opinion. And a conflict is really between 2 people or 2 groups of people. So there's equal banter back and forth, and it can escalate. It can become very nasty and become very hurtful, but we don't call it bullying because it's equal power back and forth, 2 parties or 2 individuals. When it escalates into bullying, it's where there's an imbalance of power, and it really is all about that imbalance of power. It's very one-sided. It's intentional. The person who is doing the bullying, their intent is to hurt, to harm, to humiliate, to embarrass, to damage relationships. They're very intentional in their behavior, and it's repetitive. It becomes this pattern of behavior. So it's not something that happens once or twice. It becomes part of their day-to-day personality and in targeting individuals. So we always say, conflict is a very normal part of life. Bullying is not and should not be tolerated in any environment.
And conflict sounds like it's a little bit more mutual.
It very much is. I mean, the degree of hurt or, insults or bickering can change from one side to the other. One person could be more hurtful than the other. The point being, though, the other person is engaging back in it.
That's a good explanation. So in your experience, what are we seeing as the long-term impacts of bullying on both the target and the bully? And how can early intervention make a difference in breaking the cycle of harmful behavior?
So yeah, it's a great question. And let me start with the targets because it's a little bit more complicated. Individuals, whether it's adults or kids who have been targeted over a period of time, there's a lot of shame attached to that. And because of that shame and fear of speaking up, and perhaps we can talk about those fears a little bit later on, they tend to just suppress all of the emotion that goes along with being targeted. And believe me, they've got every emotion under the sun, from frustration, anger, loneliness, anxiety, fear, you name it, it's all there. And the problem is, if they have no outlet, if they don't feel like they have somebody they can speak to, those emotions just manifest into psychological issues, so anxiety, depression, suicidal ideations, into physiological problems, so headaches, stomach aches, ulcers, etc. So the key really is, as parents, as any adults working with kids, is to open up the lines of communication. Don't wait until your kids come to you. Make it okay to talk about the issue of bullying. Share your own stories. And maybe you were never targeted as a kid, but I guarantee we all remember somebody from school that was targeted, and we can share those stories, or how we were part of a group that bullied someone and we never felt good about it, but we went along with it. Like, make it okay to talk about these subjects, so individuals who are currently being targeted feel more comfortable to come forward, to speak up. On the flip side, those that are doing the bullying, and we really say it's a very small number who we would define as true bullies, who really, again, their intention is there. They seem to be able to control their feelings of remorse or guilt. So those true bullies, about 2% of the world fall under that. They, believe it or not, if there is no intervention along the way, they can grow up, little bullies grow up to be big bullies. And one of the areas of mental health that they struggle with is personality disorders, particularly in the area of narcissism. And so I just want to share a visual with you of somebody that I would describe as a true bully. There's somebody that walks around with a spaghetti strainer on their head. And I say a spaghetti strainer because it represents their conscience. It's full of holes, so it's like a Swiss cheese conscience. And they go around doing whatever it is they do, spreading rumors, excluding others, making others feel miserable, stealing things. They just do. It becomes part of who they are. And they feel no guilt, no remorse. But every once in a while, a little bit of guilt or remorse actually finds a hole in that spaghetti strainer of a conscience and presents itself. So for a moment, the bully actually does feel that guilt or remorse. And for somebody who likes to intentionally hurt others, harm others, feeling guilt or remorse doesn't work for them. So they need to do something very quickly with that. And what they do is they create this bag of excuses that they take along with them everywhere they go, and to justify their behavior. So let's say, I'm walking down the hall and I purposely body check you. And for a nanosecond, I actually feel guilt just because of the way you look, or somebody says something, and I actually, feel that moment of remorse. Well, I don't want to feel that. So I reach into my bag of excuses that, like, if you just watched where you were walking, I wouldn't have crashed into you. And I instantly put the blame back on the target, and I justify my behavior. And if there's no intervention, if these kids continue to get away with this kind of behavior with no consequences, no backlash, that bag of excuses just gets bigger and bigger and bigger until they're a young adult and they absolutely can justify everything they're doing, which is why there's a high correlation between bullying behavior and criminal activity, because these kids eventually step over the line and they can't excuse that behavior. They can't explain to the judge why they thought it was a good idea to, punch somebody in the face or spread hurtful rumors about them. So it's really, again, without that intervention for both those being targeted and those that are doing the harm, things escalate very, very quickly.
That is an awesome visual, and I think that anyone looking at a spaghetti strainer will think of that moving forward. So thank you. You had mentioned narcissism as being a part of this, but it sounds like there's a lot of gaslighting that goes on too, where they're projecting onto the victim or to the target. But interesting, the whole concept of the second they feel remorse, that kind of presses them to do it again, or to kind of react against the target again, which is counterintuitive to a non-bully mind.
Right, for sure. I mean, ultimately, there's a hidden benefit to being a bully in society. You get what you want when you want, and nobody's going to stop you. So we all could take on that role, right? We really could. But the difference being that most of us do have empathy, we do have compassion, we do have that remorse that just automatically steers our behavior in a kinder direction.
Thank goodness for that.
Yes, indeed.
So I read your blog where you discuss the 4 fears that often keep bullying targets and witnesses from speaking up. Can you share with our audience what those fears are and how parents can help their kids overcome them so they feel empowered to stand up for themselves and others being bullied?
Okay. Well, the 4 fears are basically fear of retaliation, which is a very justified fear. Fear, if a child speaks up or reports the bullying and nobody else supports them in that report, nobody goes to the principal or goes to the teacher or coach with them, retaliation is very likely. So that's one fear. Fear that the adult they tell, and in this case, generally a teacher or a coach, won't take them seriously and will just kind of undermine or belittle, not belittle, but just sort of minimize the situation and just simply say, like, go play with somebody else or ignore them. Fear that a parent will make the situation worse, will come into the school or go onto the field at the sports and embarrass their child who is already very, very ashamed and embarrassed. But the biggest fear of all, and I would say sort of age 9 and up, is this fear of being seen as a rat or a tattler and then being rejected from their peer group. One of the most basic needs we all have as human beings is this need to belong, to fit in. And so, we all search for that group that we can be part of. And sometimes we feel like speaking up will do more harm than not. And so as parents, as schools, as sporting organizations, we need to mobilize everyone to speak up. We need everyone to understand that if you witness something and you do nothing, you are part of the problem. We should never, ever expect the child or the individual, and this is true of an adult in the workplace as well. We should never expect the person who's being targeted to have to go and ask for help by themselves or to go and stand up to the bully by themselves. So we at Dare to Care, we're always talking about, we've got the silent majority, which is the largest group of all the individuals who see it, who witness it, but say nothing. And it's not because they don't care. It's a little bit of apathy, a little bit of this behavior's become normalized, so they're just kind of used to it. But mostly it's just they don't have the skills. They don't know what they're supposed to do, or they fear that they'll make the situation worse. So we need to teach everybody skills. We need to make it an expectation that every person at any age, if you see something, you need to speak up. You need to support the target, go with them to the teacher or to the coach or to a parent, but don't just stand there and gawk.
And it's funny because when we talk to our kids or when I talk to mine, I'm like, well, if they don't accept you, that's their loss and whatever. But to a kid, that's so epic to not
It
feel
is.
accepted. That's status and popularity and acceptance and belonging. That's kind of that's the motor in a child of that age, you know?
It surely is. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, obviously we have the basic needs of food, clothing, shelter, but I would say that need to belong comes right after those 3 basics. And true of adults as well. I think we're as adults better able to handle rejection or better able to maybe find a different group, but not so much for kids. So yeah, it really comes down to, and I think the success of our program is that we are mobilizing the masses, uh, switching them by giving them the skills and support. Instead of being a silent majority, they're now a caring majority, and that really is the key to bully prevention. Yeah.
When you're talking about being a silent majority and whatnot, does this apply to witnessing bullying in person as well as cyber bullying and whatnot? Because as as we all know, social media has taken over our world, and kids are getting younger and younger in their access points there. There's a lot of keyboard warriors. A lot of kids are able or find a way to hide it from their parents. And so how does social media play into that concept?
Yeah, same thing. It's easy to sit behind your computer and just comment or like, or, add a few new insults. It's the same sort of mindset that if you see it on the computer, if somebody's spreading a rumor about a classmate or a teammate or a coworker, the first step is to speak up and say, you need to stop this. This is not okay. They may stop, they may not, but hopefully by you acknowledging it, others will acknowledge it as well. By simply ignoring it or blocking them, sometimes we have to do that out of necessity, but we're not really being part of the change. I think we all need to assert ourselves, whether it's in person or online. And the individual, the bully may stop, they may not, but the more they hear it and the more they see the masses changing and saying, this is not okay, and not laughing or giggling or sharing that, hopefully they reflect. I guess the bottom line is, and this is always hard for me to say and probably will anger some people, but when we talk about roughly 2% of a school or 2% of a workplace or a sporting organization being the true bullies, we may not change the 2%. Because we can't go in and change the family and the stinking thinking. I mean, bullying is a learned behavior. It's 100% learned and primarily learned by the caregiver or main caregiver. And, unless we can go in and change that stinking thinking in the home that's sort of mobilizing this awful thinking and justification to treat people horribly, unless we can get into the home, we may not change anything, but we sure can change the 98% who witness it, see it, are supporting the bully's behavior. That's where we need to really, really emphasize bullying prevention programming, is mobilizing the masses.
You had mentioned earlier that it's good to have conversations with our kids about bullying that we were perhaps inflicted with as children or that we witnessed. I was talking with my son recently about some bullying that I witnessed because I too wasn't overly bullied as a child, a little bit here and there, but nothing crazy. And I remember a girl on the bus that I was on lighting another girl's hair on fire from behind the seat, and that girl never even knew it happened. And I said to my kids, my biggest regret is not speaking up. And hindsight's obviously 2020, but like you said, sharing the bullying stories is important, but also sharing how you reacted would be important to say, I could have done more, I could have done better, but I got swallowed up by peer pressure and by everybody kind of thinking it was funny. And so I went along with it, even though subconsciously I knew that that wasn't the right thing to do. I knew that that was mean. I knew that that was uncaring towards that individual. And so it's a loaded conversation to have with our kids, but the good news is parents are having those conversations with their kids now in a more open fashion.
Yes, I agree. And when we talked about the fears that keep individuals from speaking up, there's one more sociological impact on bullying. It's called the bystander effect. And it's the larger the group, the less likely somebody is going to step forward, because our sense of guilt or remorse or responsibility goes down when we don't see anybody else stepping in. We're like, oh, well, nobody else is, so why should I? And it's such a flawed, a train of thought that, oh, nobody's stepping in, so I won't. And we need to switch that conversation, to that dialogue around, instead of nobody else is stepping in, I'm going to be the brave person that steps up and says something. Because I would say 9 out of 10 times, as soon as somebody says something, the rest start to support that positive change. It just takes that one brave person to speak up. And I think it's starting. I am seeing it in sports. I'm seeing parents in the stands saying enough is enough. Like, we're not going to listen to these parents bad mouthing the refs or the coaches or other parents. So it's starting, but it's a slow process.
How does a child's brain development and the stages of their development play into the awareness of how to react to bullying? So, like the the empathy and the sympathy and all of those things, they all come with age. So how does that impact the reaction of a child towards bullying?
Yeah, when we developed Dare to Care 25 years ago, actually, this is our 25th year, because my background was teaching and being exposed to different developmental stages, we were very careful with the younger kids. The focus was more on friendship, like what does a buddy look like? As opposed to what does bullying behavior look like? It was more on the positive side. And how can you be a good friend? How can you show up to school or sports being that positive person? And then starting around, I would say grade 2, grade 3 is when empathy it starts to become part of their personality, and it's very much modeled. I mean, I think even though we talk about the younger kids maybe not being able to understand empathy, as long as they're seeing it modeled by their significant caregivers and others around them, they're going to pick up on those skills much more quickly. So yes, in terms of learning styles and readiness to learn certain topics, certainly we need to be aware of that, and our programming needs to be grade or age appropriate. But I think, from day one, we model caring and helping and, talking positively about animals instead of, treating them poorly. Like everything that can happen in the home is creating this framework that the child then grows from. So when it comes to, standing up for others, that's modeled. That's modeled by the parents. And these kids are such sponges. They really, really are, which is good and bad, right? Because if they're surrounded by positivity and kind behavior and compassion, that becomes ingrained. But unfortunately, on the flip side, if they're surrounded by a lot of bias and hate and racism, that type of thing, at early ages, they can start to absorb that as well.
So, from an educator or parent perspective, how can we effectively intervene when a child is exhibiting bullying behavior? Is the old school, quote, zero tolerance policy losing its popularity? And are people moving towards more restorative practices? In your experience, what kind of discipline and guidance tends to yield better long-term outcomes and why?
So I very strongly believe that we can't isolate the bullies and give them one-on-one counseling about their behavior and empathy and social skills, et cetera, that they need to be part of the mass in learning what bullying behavior is and, how to stand up to that or how to stand up to bullying. And then we need to hold them accountable at every age. We're not doing anybody any favors by just saying, well, this child's going through things at home, therefore we give them a little bit of grace, or this child's really young and they haven't learned empathy yet, or they're just having a really bad day. I think we need to be very consistent, clear and concise in our discipline policies or code of conducts about how we're going to manage these situations. So not just a bunch of verbiage, but some steps, some actionable steps that teachers, coaches, parents can apply. So basically taking the code of conduct off the page and putting it into action, holding people accountable for their behavior. There's a learning opportunity in everything these kids do. And what a missed opportunity when we're too busy to discipline them or too busy to sit down with them and talk about what they've done and what they've done wrong. You talked about zero tolerance. It's interesting, years and years ago, I went to a conference around discipline with dignity, it was called. How do we discipline children, but maintain their dignity, but have them learn from their experience? And zero tolerance was a big thing at that time. Everybody was saying, oh, we have a zero tolerance policy. And somebody said it simply, and it made so much sense. He said, zero tolerance is like zero thinking. It's like a blanket statement of this is how we're going to deal with bullying, regardless of the age or situation. And really, at Dare to Care, we call it no nonsense approach, not zero tolerance. We need to take a no nonsense. We need to investigate. We need to sit down with the child, never sit the two together. That's the biggest learning for schools and workplace as well. You never, because of this imbalance of power, never sit the bully and the target down together. So investigate, and then, provide some consequences that are fitting to the crime, something that they can learn from. So it's really about taking the time to investigate, and each case is going to be slightly different, but it needs to be dealt with. We can't ignore it. So the zero tolerance, I think, is losing its grip. You don't see it as much. You don't see it stated as much in schools or code of conducts. And this restorative justice, we're certainly, for the last 20 years, that's been on the table, and I've been to conferences around that as well. But my thought around restorative justice, I believe it's great, but not at the very beginning of the dealing with the bullying situation, because again, the imbalance of power is so great. What child is going to want to sit in a room, in a circle, even with trained professionals, sit and listen to the bully manipulate and lie, because they are master manipulators, and they will charm the pants off of you. They will say the bare minimum of what they think they've done. They don't take ownership for their behavior. They're very good to turn the tables and put the blame on everyone else. So that poor child sitting in that restorative justice, in that circle, is listening to all those lies. So when it comes time for them to share how they're feeling, they're going to say the bare minimum. They're sitting beside their biggest fear. They're terrified. They just want to get out of there. So I think once it's been dealt with effectively, and there's been some change in behavior, and the child who has been targeted now is feeling more safe, and feeling like, the organized school work, sporting organization is behind them, then bring in restorative justice to repair damaged relationships, but not at the beginning.
Just want to backtrack a little bit here. When we were talking about bullies come from a foundation, learned from a foundation of, or an environment of behavior, is there ever a circumstance where a child has a very loving and positive household, and they still end up honing a bullying persona? Is that ever, or is it always a really a nature versus nurture thing here?
Yeah, that's another very great question. And, there's always going to be anomalies in this. And certainly, some kids are born with a personality disorder that would show up more in their interactions with kids as being more aggressive, etc. So bullying is a learned behavior, but there's other behaviors out there that need to be dealt with that aren't learned behaviors. So when you talk about sociopaths or psychopaths, they're also lacking empathy, and they can be very hurtful, but it is not a learned behavior. They were born that way. So, and also, we also have situations where kids who have been chronically bullied then take it out on younger siblings or younger classmates, because they feel they're the only people they might have power over. So they kind of test that behavior out. I wouldn't say they're true bullies. They're just trying to exist. They're just trying to figure out how to survive in this world that so far has been very mean to them. So I would say it wouldn't take much to those kids that are both the target and the bully. It doesn't take much to remove that bully label from them, because it's not like they really want to. They just feel at that moment that it's the only control they have is to take it out on younger individuals. It's very complex, but I would stand by the large majority of bullying that we do see stems from a learned behavior.
So as we head into Anti-Bullying Week, and just reflecting on your career and the success of Dare to Care, what gives you hope for the future in the fight against bullying, and what do you believe still needs to change at a systematic level for more meaningful progress?
I think we've come a long way, and again, being in schools for 25 years and in the sport setting for the last 6 years, I am so thrilled when I return to a school or return to a different sporting organization, and the kids, how much they remember from the last time. So this common language, and definitely being able to differentiate between bullying and conflict, like that's at the heart of everything. I don't think we can be effective in shifting the imbalance of power away from the bullies to the caring majority unless we do provide a common language and skills. And I think that that's happening. And I think schools and sport organizations are embracing bullying prevention more than ever before and understanding the importance of it. What I would say is the biggest roadblock is still, in general, as a society, we are quite reactive in society, and from top down, but mostly from the top. Wait till there is a big problem, a big issue, and then we try to step in and resolve it. And the whole premise of the Dare to Care program is about early prevention and intervention. So giving kids this common language and the skills, giving the adults who care for them a common language and the skills to be able to take their reports of bullying and to act on them. And again, like I said earlier, taking those code of conducts that sit in an office somewhere and nobody looks at them, everybody's meant to sign off on them. Like, oh, I read the code of conduct or the discipline policy. Nobody's reading them. So take them off the binder and put them into action by creating, an environment where it's expected that everybody speaks up. But having said that, kind of backtracking a little bit, we can't expect kids to speak up and to, create change in their school or in their environment unless the adults also step up and, again, have that common language and skills to actually do something with the reports, do something constructive with the reports. So I feel like we've come a long way, but there's still too much reactivity in society and less, I look at grants and funding, and a lot of it is for reactive side of things. Like, we've got these issues going on. How can we deal with them? Why don't we start putting more money towards early prevention? So mental health programs in elementary school, bullying prevention programs in elementary school. It just makes sense to me. Elementary school counselors, that's, they're spread very thin, and most of the counselors are in junior high and high school. I should say a caveat here. In some provinces, they are very fortunate they have school counselors in the elementary system, which is lovely. But that should be across the board throughout the country, an absolute must in every single school. So still room to improve for sure, but I do believe we're on the right track.
So lastly, Dare to Care offers a lot of resources for schools, individuals, parents, workplaces to equip people with the tools to handle bullying and ultimately prevent bullying altogether. Can you let our listeners know what kinds of resources they can find and how they can access them?
Yeah, so in 2021, we switched over from an in-person program delivery with schools because of COVID. And we knew that we were going to be out of schools for a very long time. So we lifted and shifted our entire program to an online platform that has modules for K-2, grade 3-4, grade 5-6, grade 7-9 for teaching staff and support staff. And we also have parent education modules. And one of the things, it was a big debate in 2022, do we go back to in-person delivery or do we stay with the online modules? But the feedback we were getting from schools was so positive about the online modules, because we could, instead of just being in a school for one day where we worked with all of the grades in one day, we now have these very intense, very grade appropriate modules that every topic around bullying, we can go a whole lot deeper, and we can add classroom activities along with that to anchor the learning. So it's far more effective. So our website, Dare to Care, is www.daretocare.ca. And you can go to the school program. The sport program is in person across the country. We have facilitators across the country. But for our school program, it is simple step. You just purchase it online And for parents, it's $12 for a full year, access to our learning modules and a resource portal that has frequently asked questions, resources, great books to read, posters for your kids, that type of thing. So I probably the best way is to go to our website, and perhaps we could add a link to this podcast as well that takes parents directly to the purchase page for the parenting program. One of the things, with our program is they get a full year access if a school purchases it. So if they have new families coming in throughout the year or new staff, everybody's on the same page. So they didn't have to be there the one day that Dare to Care was there in person. So I think it just carries over into a school-wide approach much, much better than our in-person. I miss the in-person, but I think this is far more effective.
Parents are concerned for their kids, and this is informing ourselves more is never going to hurt. We need to learn more about it and how to help our children feel empowered, being able to advocate for themselves, and knowing who to go to and when to go to an adult or to a safe person to talk to them about this. So I absolutely love your mission, and I think we're going to have you come back at some point.
Always happy to do that. So yes, thank you for having me.
And that's a wrap for this episode. Thanks so much for joining us on Parenting Adventures. Remember, you're not alone in this journey, and we're always here to help. Parenting is like trying to fold a fitted sheet. It seems impossible at first, but with enough determination, you can make it work, kind of. If you're ready for the next step, visit tutorteach.ca/tutoring for personalized mindful tutoring and discover how we've helped over 3,000 students reach their goals. Until next time, keep calm and fold on.